My name is Mike Marchetti, and this is Straight Up on Southbridge. Our guest today is Congressman Richard Neal of the Massachusetts 1st Congressional District. The 1st Congressional District covers all of Western Mass and South Central Massachusetts, including the town of Southbridge. Congressman Neal was born in Worcester and grew up in Springfield. He served on the Springfield City Council and ran for Congress and was elected in 1988. He has served in Congress since then, more than 30 years. So Congressman Neal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Delighted to be with you.
So first question, Congressman, I noted from your biography that you received a master's degree from the University of Hartford in 1976. Then you were elected mayor of Springfield in 1984. What did you do between 1976 and 1984?
I was a member of the Springfield City Council, and I was a professor at Springfield Technical Community College as well. And I taught at all the area colleges around Springfield as well. Yeah.
Right. Oh. What did you teach? History?
Generally politics, history, and I taught some business courses at Western New England University as well. And I still am very proud of the fact that to this day I'm a lecturer at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst and have been for many years.
So I understand that congratulations are in order. Last week you received an honorary degree from the University of Ulster in Northern Ireland.
Well, thank you, and it really is an honor. One of my grandmothers was born in Banbridge in County Down, so to return home and to receive, I think, the positive acclamation that the university received because of my work in helping to secure the Good Friday Agreement, which ended the longest-standing political dispute in the history of the Western world, and you can see the result today in the north of Ireland. It is peaceful.
Well, congratulations, quite an honor.
Thank you.
Now, you come from a working-class background. Your mother was a housewife and your father was a custodian, both of whom passed away when you were very young. How did this background shape your worldview?
Well, I think part of it is that I had a terrific aunt and a terrific grandmother who helped to raise us afterwards. And I think that part of my view of family is that they come in all different shapes and sizes. And I know that we lived together as a family even after my mom and dad were deceased. And it was also their pensions. And it was the genius of Mr. Roosevelt's Social Security Survivor Program that allowed us to live and function as a family. So to this very day, I am grateful to family, aunt and grandmother in particular, a wonderful mother, and Roosevelt's work of art, the Social Security Survivor Benefit.
Very good. You still live in Springfield?
Still live in Springfield.
Basketball Hall of Fame.
What a great place it is.
Interesting story in one of those books. I was looking at how they created the game. So why don't we get down to the nitty-gritty, okay? Currently, you serve as chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. This is the oldest of all congressional committees, started in 1795 and made a permanent committee in 1802. Am I correct?
You're correct. It actually met for the first time in 1789.
Really?
Yes, it met for the purpose as described as Ways and Means, the ways and means of organizing the government to raise the revenue that's necessary for administering the government.
Well, this makes you the 4th or 5th most powerful political figure in Washington, right after Nancy Pelosi.
Well, I'm careful about how I ascribe my own fortunes in terms of power, but the Ways and Means Committee is certainly the key perch for a member to aspire to in the House of Representatives. I would think right after the Speaker's job, it is the most important job in the House.
And my follow-up question was, can you tell us why the Ways and Means Committee is so important?
Well, we have broad responsibility, understanding that the Constitution that says that all revenue measures have to originate in the House of Representatives, and within the House of Representatives, they have to originate in the Ways and Means Committee. So we have broad jurisdiction for all tax measures, Social Security, Medicare, a tax portion of Medicaid, management of the public debt, all trade and tariffs all begin in the House Ways and Means Committee. So it has enormous responsibility as it relates to those initiatives, plus pensions.
Right. Now, you requested 6 years of income tax returns for President Trump himself and for some of his business enterprises. You made this request to the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. Why did the request go there?
Because the IRS Commissioner, as delegated by the Secretary of the Treasury in 1955, has broad responsibility as the custodian of our tax records. So in this instance here, we chose the IRS because it was consistent with legal responsibility.
Now, the IRS commissioner was requested to provide those returns by April 23rd yesterday.
He did not. I
Did he
spoke
get
with the
through?
Secretary of the Treasury yesterday afternoon. We agreed to disagree. I think the law is very clear. It says shall furnish upon request of the chairman of the committee. And recall, Mike, that the last 8 American presidents have all voluntarily submitted their tax forms for review. President Trump indicated he would do that during the presidential campaign and then said that he was under audit. And the IRS commissioner said you could still release them. Our public purpose here, and that's really what it is to determine how the IRS goes about auditing a presidential tax form. So there's a long way to go in this, but not to miss the point that we believe that the law is on our side as it relates to the tax forms.
Well, will you use your subpoena powers to seek the information?
We are now in the midst of seeking advice from House counsel as to how to proceed. That is one of the options that could be available to us.
And if the IRS commissioner refuses to comply with your request, then what? Can you charge him
I've always assumed, Mike, I'm not naive, that this was headed toward the federal courts.
Yeah.
And I could tell from the early stages that the administration was going to be resistant to the idea of having the tax forms reviewed.
Well, could you charge him with contempt of Congress?
You could charge the IRS commissioner with contempt of Congress. That's a step that we haven't determined that we would embrace as of yet.
All right. So you think this will end up in court somehow?
It will end up in court.
All right. Trump's lawyers and his advisors claim that your committee is not entitled to his returns because the request is a political fishing expedition. How do you answer that claim?
My interest here, and has been from day one, an examination of how the IRS proceeds. Anybody who knows me, you know that I am not governed by an unsleeping sense of malevolence in seeking these forms. I haven't attempted to do fundraising. I've avoided the cable shows. For me, this is a matter of policy.
Right.
I've approached this by being methodical, judicious, and careful. My words have been chosen, again, I think with great care, only to make sure that the court case that we have doesn't diverge into more of a discussion about politics when I want this to be focused on policy.
Well, I guess the burning question is, will the public get to view Trump's tax returns before the 2020 election? Is the public entitled to see them, or is only the committee
Only the
entitled to
committee would be, but the committee could vote at a appropriate moment to release the tax forms. But I think that there's also a model that Richard Nixon used, in which he asked that the Joint Committee on Taxation, which is a group of professionals, accountants, attorneys, and economists, they could, as they did with Richard Nixon, they could review the forms.
All right. So I would like to shift our discussion now to issues that come under the heading of bringing home the bacon. What is the role of the Ways and Means Committee in creating and implementing a much-needed infrastructure improvement program?
Well, I'm going to allow you to make some news, because on Tuesday morning, I'm going to be meeting with the president to talk about an infrastructure plan. As you know, he campaigned on an infrastructure plan for the country. We want one as Democrats. I would highlight some of the things that we got done here in the town of Southbridge during my time. A USDA grant got the police department built. We had with Florence Chandler, who was the town manager at the time, we had the gazebo was built. And perhaps one of the biggest achievements I've had in legislative life is at the old AO site in the convention center. Quinsigamond Community College offers courses on the site. It's really been a terrific story. That was more than $70 million of federal money. And I do think that there was a stimulus effect that comes along with infrastructure spending. So highways, roadways, bridges, airports, rail, broadband, sewer, and water should be part of this discussion as we go forward. And I anticipate, as I discuss this with the president on Tuesday, that we will open up the opportunity here for a major, major investment in America's failing infrastructure plans.
Very good.
Yeah.
So approximately how many towns and cities are there in the 1st Massachusetts Congressional District?
Specifically, there are 87.
Really? I would have guessed about 30 or 40.
No, the old one, when I was in the 2nd district, and you were in the 2nd district with me,
Right.
there were 41 cities and towns. And then the district extended to include all of Berkshire County,
Right.
a small part of Hampshire County, and a small part of Franklin County, a small part of Worcester County, and then the consolidation of Hampden County, where almost 2/3 of the population resides.
And I assume they are all in need of a substantial infrastructure improvements, as we are here in Southbridge.
I agree, and one of the things that I think that we could do that we all ought to be able to agree on, and that is extending rail transportation from Boston to Worcester to Springfield
Well, that would
and
be
on,
nice,
hopefully, to Pittsfield. I think that makes good sense. I've convinced Governor Baker to do the study, and I hope that the result of that study will lead to a greater investment in east-west passenger rail.
You sort of answered my question here, are the prospects for such programs nationwide and in our district. You sort of already answered that you are.
Yeah, but I think that it calls forth what's happened. Anybody who's been to an airport recently, if you compare that with airports in other places on the globe, we've really fallen behind. And I think that there is no reason in this day and age why we couldn't extend broadband to the most rural parts of America. It's really that important.
Well, here in Southbridge, our roads and streets are a mess and in need of repair or replacement. Is that typical of other towns and cities in the district?
It sure is. And the other initiative I think that we had a chance to review today when I was driving by was working with Senator Moore way back. We were able to do a pretty neat bike path here in Southbridge, and that was a federal earmark. And that was pretty important between Southbridge and Dudley.
Would roads and street improvements be covered under an infrastructure improvement program?
Positively.
Right.
And I think that the other thing that the President has agreed to in a conversation that I had with him and the Secretary of the Treasury, which would oversee parts of it, they've agreed to what we call the 80-20 formula. 80% of the federal government expenditure would come from us, and then 20% would come from a match through the states.
Okay.
That's been the traditional formula.
And Southbridge is also in need of a new fire station and improvement in dispatching services. Would needs such as those be covered under a comprehensive infrastructure program?
Well, I would like to think so. I think that there are some initiatives that the town might undertake. We would make some suggestions to them on how to go about it. I think that there would also have to be a substantial municipal investment in that sort of an initiative. I don't think that the federal government would come in and build a fire station on its own, but they would partner on it. And I think that the state and the federal government and the local communities, they would be able to take that up and perhaps come to a pretty good formula that would allow for that construction. I think that there is also, under FEMA, there would be an opportunity to upgrade some of the technology as well.
What federal agency is responsible for approving federal SAFER grants? I understand that Southbridge may be seeking such a grant, and I was wondering if you were in a position to assist local governments in obtaining
The
such
answer
grants.
is yes, and I would be glad to. My office has had pretty good success
All right.
with many of these grants, and I think that we would be only too happy to help out. There are some communities that have done really well with these grants,
All right.
and I think that embracing that concept would make a lot of sense.
Good. So let me shift to some other political issues which are being discussed. Do you have a position on Medicare for all, and if so, what is it?
I think that it's more of an evolutionary trend. I think that as one who helped to write the Affordable Care Act, which I think is really important, I think building upon that in the immediate future will get us to a more encompassing healthcare initiative. I am concerned about the biggest employers, including in Southbridge, Harrington Hospital. I want to make sure that they're in support of that sort of an initiative, understanding that there are parts of some of the European models that I think we could embrace. Even Senator Sanders has said that we're not going to get there tomorrow. So I think we can take some satisfaction from the fact that right now we can claim with accuracy that 100% of the children in Massachusetts are covered.
Right.
And 97% of the adults in Massachusetts are covered. That's a pretty extraordinary achievement. So I think building upon the Affordable Care Act makes good sense.
Okay. Now, I was going to ask you if you supported the recent Trump tax cuts, which I believe have exacerbated the income inequality in this country. I know that you voted against it.
Not only did I vote against them, I led the charge in the Ways and Means Committee because we had jurisdiction. That tax bill was written in 51 days without one hearing and without one witness. The result is that, as you've described accurately, there's more concentrated wealth in America. The top rate getting cut from 39.6 to 37%. The corporate rate going from 36 to 21%. President Obama proposed a 28% rate. The Republicans at that time came back with a 25% rate. We could have compromised and come up with a competitive rate, understanding, as Obama correctly noted, that the corporate rate had to be adjusted given OECD rates across Europe. But I also would think that when you look at who got what in that tax cut, overwhelmingly, the benefit of that cut went to people at the very top.
I agree. Now, some liberals in Congress have proposed a set of aspirations called the Green New Deal. Do you have a position on those proposals, and if so, what is it?
I think it's a pretty good proposal, but it's just, remember, a resolution at this point. It's an opinion. And I think that we're all in agreement with the opinion, but I would also like to see some legislative language. There is a Castor bill, a woman from Florida, that has a bill that has more, I would say, meat on the bone, that I certainly am in support of. I'm a sponsor of it. I have supported every environmental measure that has come through the Congress in the last 31 years, and have always had broad support from all the environmental groups. I am concerned about some parts of the Green New Deal, but I think that aspirationally, trying to get there is a good idea.
Seems very ambitious.
Well, it's ambitious, but we all should recognize that reducing the carbon footprint is a really good idea, but I'm not sure that just an opinion is enough.
Okay. So I only have a couple more questions. Change to progressive solutions for our problems probably rest on change in control of government to more progressive political figures in Congress and the White House. In the end, elections matter. I assume you agree.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay. And do you have any predictions about whether the country will vote to take a new direction in 2020?
Here's the challenge. I think that despite the fact that there are a handful of members of the House of Representatives that have drawn great attention, there's also a competing analysis, and that is that we won 4 seats in New Jersey, 4 seats in Pennsylvania, a seat in Kansas, a seat in Oklahoma, a seat in Utah, a seat in South Carolina, and 4 seats in Orange County, former home of John Birchers.
Right.
And my point is that I think that protecting those seats is as important to giving us a governing majority as anything. And those would not be considered real liberal seats, but they were the ones that gave us the majority in the last Congress. So I think that the Democratic Party has to be a big family. And we have to welcome sometimes competing voices, because our differences are very small compared to our differences with the Republicans. And I think that's the better way to approach this.
All right. Well, thank you, Congressman Neal. It's been a very informed and lively discussion of the issues facing all residents of the 1st Congressional District of Massachusetts. I wish you the best of luck and Godspeed for
I'll
the
take
future.
it. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much for coming on. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to be with you.
All right, thank you.